The original Audi SQ7 was a car that I was a big fan of. Despite it being a bit of an oddity in the performance SUV world with a diesel V8 engine, it offered a fantastic blend of tech and performance, all in a practical, family-friendly package. Now though, Audi have updated it, so I was keen to get behind the wheel and see what had changed.
So this, the facelifted SQ7, has the same basic ingredients as that original car, just with a fefew tweaks here and there. We see the return of the 4-litre twin-turbo diesel V8, and it's still kicking out 435 horsepower, and it's got a mouth-watering 900 newton meters of torque. And you really feel that torque too. 0 to 62 miles an hour in just 4.8 seconds. And when you put that into perspective, it's faster than a Porsche Cayman S, which is a proper mid-engine sports car. It's no secret that diesel engines are increasingly falling out of fashion with manufacturers and buyers alike, but it frustrates me a little bit because modern diesel engines are actually very clean. But I guess it's this sort of whole ethos about ICE versus EV at the moment and where it's all going. But as diesel engines go, I think this one is probably one of the best around. Power is absolutely effortless, and all that torque really comes into play, especially if you want to put your foot down. When you're on the move, it just goes. There's no need to wait for the revs or get the power, it's just there whenever you need it. And a lot of that's down to some clever stuff going on in the engine bay in front of me. The V8 is a twin turbo, which is certainly not revolutionary, but those turbos are combined with an electric supercharger that really gets things going in the lower revs, or when the engine isn't throwing out enough exhaust gases to get the old-fashioned turbo spinning. What that means is turbo lag is pretty much non-existent. You hit the accelerator and it just goes. Now, things like electric superchargers take a feral amount of power. So the SQ7 has its own 48-volt electrical subsystem sat in the boot underneath the rear seats.
But they've also used the same system to power another clever bit of tech, and that's the electromechanical active roll stabilisation. Not really the catchiest name in the world, but essentially it makes the SQ7 much more composed in the corners.
Put simply, this clever bit of wizardry forces the car upright when you're in a bend, so when the G-forces are wanting to pull the car over, the SQ7 actively forces itself up, which basically means it corners very flat like a sports car.
And it has another handling trick up its sleeve, rear wheel steering. When cornering, the rear wheels turn in the opposite direction to aid agility in tight bends, whilst at motorway speeds they will turn in the same direction to aid stability.
In the old car, the steering was quite heavy at low speeds. It seems that they've improved that quite significantly, but where the old car sounded amazing, sadly, it's a bit muted on this model. The new SQ7 starts at £76,000, but for an extra £20,000, you get the Vorsprung pack, which basically gives you pretty much every single option you can think of. It ticks every single box, other than, in this case, metallic paint and red brake calipers.
It will also add, amongst other things, laser headlights, adaptive cruise control, head-up display, a 360-degree parking camera, and a massage function to the front seats, which I'm a big fan of.
I think the seats look absolutely fantastic. I don't know whether it's a bit of a placebo effect, but they feel just a tiny bit more comfortable than the old seats. You've certainly got a little bit more height adjustment as well in the car. And one thing you'll notice is the headrests are actually integrated on these seats where they weren't before. In terms of competition, well, for the same sort of money, you can get yourself a Porsche Cayenne S, but the SQ7 is almost half a second quicker 0 to 60 than that car. So if you want something that's going to keep up, you'll be looking at something like maybe a BMW X5M or a Range Rover Sport SVR, but they're going to set you back at least 20, 30, 40,000 pounds more. Plus, none of those have got 7 seats. For me, probably the biggest competitor in its class is the SQ8, which shares so many similarities, interior, engine, performance, etc. But that car, even though it's sort of sportier, coupe style, is actually 45 kilograms heavier than this car, which is quite surprising. And of course, that still doesn't have the 7 seats.
When you consider what you're getting for your money with the SQ7, it starts to look like very good value indeed. Coming from the same parent company as the likes of Lamborghini and Bentley, Audi benefit from using the same features and technology from much of their higher ticket siblings.
Of course they share parts and infrastructure. You can see here that this is so similar to the Lamborghini Urus. I'm not a fan of this haptic feedback touchscreen. I know that's where it's all going. I've got to maybe get with the times, but There's no question that inside this car is absolute luxury.
Also, things like that catchy named stabilisation system I mentioned earlier are featured on the likes of the Bentley Continental GT, so you're getting technology from the pinnacle of the car world in a much more affordable package.
But I'm not silly, they are definitely more prestigious in terms of marks and brand, and you prefer those badges perhaps, but Audi definitely holds its own as well. Plus there's something you can do in this car that you can't do in any of those luxury SUVs that I've mentioned, and that's drive from London to Geneva over 600 miles on one single tank of fuel. It's a massive selling point for me, as it should be. Fuel's expensive. This is a brilliant compromise, but you still get that fantastic performance. I've done more than 10,000 miles in the old SQ7 and average a shade over 30 miles to the gallon, which is good in anybody's book, but you can actually get a lot more than that if you weren't perhaps so spirited in your driving style. In case you haven't noticed, I absolutely love this car. If you had £100,000, even £150,000 to spend on one car that you had to drive solely for the next 5 years, I think you'd have to search a long, long way to find a better all-rounder than the SQ7.